Do the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so is there any public comment? Okay, we're going to move on. We have a very jam-packed agenda this evening, so we're going to zip right along and go over the minutes from September 20th meeting.
I move we approve the minutes from the September 20th meeting as presented in the packet.
I second.
And Helen, can you hear us? Because we lost you there for a second.
I can hear you.
Okay, great.
I made a motion that we accept the minutes as presented in the packet.
Thank you. And then Mr. Hicks was second. So. And is there discussion? Okay, and then we'll call for a vote. Ms. Picard?
Yes.
Ms. Vitsky?
Yes.
Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
And myself. Okay, and then we also need to move on to the NAMS ptac donation for the Kiln.
I move that we accept the donation for the Kiln from the NAMS ptac as presented in the packet.
I second.
Okay. Is there discussion?
This is great, and I thank the North Andover Parent-Teacher Association for identifying the need and the new kiln.
No, it is very exciting. Okay, and so are we ready to vote? Okay, Ms. Picard?
Yes.
Ms. Vitsky?
Yes.
Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
And myself. Okay, we're gonna move right into our student reports.
Hi everyone, good to see you again. For those of you who I haven't met yet, my name is Nora El-Khadiji. I'm a senior. And just to quickly run you through what's happened since our last meeting, we finally had the Summer Book Club Advisory that took place last week. And I think, just speaking on behalf of my group, I think everyone was grateful that we had like small groups and more intimate discussions this year, rather than like essays or just big groups of clusters of kids who all read the same thing like previous years. So I think that was something new that we all liked. Something else that happened last Thursday, was the club fair. And again, speaking on behalf of the clubs I'm in, I think it went very well, and I can tell that the underclassmen especially are very engaged compared to previous years, so I'm grateful for that. And then one more thing, there was a PAC meeting yesterday, and I don't have too many details about that. From what I heard, it went well. And then for things coming up, we have us AP Gov students will be assisting the Women's League of Voters during all lunches for the student voter registration. And then next week is Spirit Week, and then homecoming will be on Friday. And then, if I remember correctly, there was a concern about cultural appropriation during one of the dress-up days, like Wild West. And I ran that down with student council, and I think from what I've seen from how the sports teams has dressed up during that day, it's been mostly just cowboy hats, and so cultural appropriation hasn't really, it's been discussed, but it hasn't seemed to have been a problem, which is good. And then one more thing, as we all know, I'm a senior, so the college processes and all the seminars and the info sessions are really starting to pick up, which is good for everyone. So I'm grateful for that. Ben?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Abbott. I'm a junior at the high school. We have PSAT Saturday. I'm taking them. It is early, but it's a good practice for the SAT later in the fall, and it's a good chance to win scholarship money. There was an NHS meeting for juniors and seniors last Friday, I believe, or last Thursday. The applications are due on November 10th, so I'm getting to work on that. I'm personally applying. The sealed biliteracy test went well. That was about a week ago. The new attendance policy at the high school has been very effective as opposed to last year. The halls are clear. They're really cracking down on being late to class, being absent. Fees for sports, in my opinion, has been going well. I'm excited to see all the new athletic department improvements that go along with the new policy of charging for different sports games. We have a golf match tonight. hockey tonight, swimming, football, and volleyball tomorrow, girls and boys soccer Saturday, and a unified basketball game on Monday in Chelmsford. And yearbook orders are due on the 28th of October.
Awesome.
Great, thank you. Do we have questions, Ms. Picard?
Yes, I'm just wondering if seniors are allowed to apply for NHS this round.
Yes, so seniors who either did not qualify for NHS because of GPA requirements or they didn't make it through the application process are allowed to apply again. It's slightly different, but they're still, if they make it, they still have full graduation cords and full graduation awards. So yes.
Fantastic. I love that we can celebrate achievement when it happens. Thank you.
Ms. Vitsky?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Hicks?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. McDevitt?
Just really two, and probably a little bit more for Nora, but obviously, you know, being a senior and how things were a little bit more limited over the past couple of years, how much more involvement do you see in like the college fairs? I mean, I'm sure that kind of takes a little bit to kind of come back, but are you seeing a lot of students attend? And Ben, you may see some of these as well, but may not remember them happening as much, so.
You know, I think as we're entering kind of like a post-COVID era for applying to colleges, I think everyone's grateful that we're starting to meet with colleges in person and that we get to meet with guidance counselors one-on-one. So I think that coming back in school in person has definitely like boosted that engagement, but I'd say there's still like progress to be made involving like different grades and other colleges.
Okay, I can tell you I had the list probably 2-3 weeks ago, and I was really impressed by the number of schools that were coming and being represented. So I'm glad to see that come back. So awesome. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have any questions either. Thank you. You guys do such a great job. Thorough. It's sports, extracurricular, all the happenings that's going on, and that's a lot of work. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
are welcome to stay, and you are welcome to go if you have. Okay, we're going to move on to Dr. Gilligan's superintendent's report.
All right, thank you. First up in the superintendent's report tonight, we have Bob Ford here from the Rotary, and he wants to talk about a couple opportunities. I know he's been in the past, and if you want to come up, Bob.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I'm Bob Ford. I am a member of the North Andover Rotary Club, and I just want to speak once again, I've done this before, is to talk about the Rotary Youth Exchange Program. Where did those students go? I want them back. What it is a program whereby students are able to go out on exchange, travel to another country, live with different host families, attend the local high school, and be totally immersed in the local culture, language. They have the challenge of accomplishing all that, of learning their way to getting to know their host families, building up a relationship with them, finding friends in the school, attending the school, and all in a foreign language. Which they start learning once they know what country they're going to, and obviously continue while they're away on exchange. So it's a fantastic opportunity for students to participate in this program. We have, in addition to our sending out students from here, from North Andover, as well as our Rotary District, which is northeastern Massachusetts plus Salem, New Hampshire, we also bring in students, hence the term exchange. So we have a North Andover student out right now. Genevieve is out in Sweden, and she will be there for the full year. Students do not come back home for holidays, vacations, or what have you. They are there for the long haul. They leave generally around the middle of August, and to start their exchange, so they're there a little before school starts and get settled in a little bit first, and they stay through the entire academic year. And then some students will stay even a little bit longer than that. There oftentimes are some trips that are offered at the end of the school year. So it is a great opportunity, and there's opportunity for travel. And all of this is done under the guidance and supervision of the local Rotarians. We find the host families, we screen them, we stay in contact with the families, with the student, to make sure that everything goes well. But the students learn. The students learn independence, self-advocacy. They grow and mature. Students generally will go out on a junior year. That's the most popular. They go out for the junior year, come back, and still join their classmates for a senior year and graduate on time, and put on their college application. I just spent the last year in Country X. So if you're looking for something to stand out about, then that certainly is a great opportunity. Right now, most importantly at the moment, I am looking for a couple more host families for our student who is here. Her name is Ada. She is here from Switzerland. Just a little background about Ada is she's 15. She'll turn 16 early next year. She was born in Spain, in northeastern Spain, and so while she was growing up, she learned to speak Spanish and Catalan. When she was 7 years old, her family moved to Switzerland, so she has had to learn German and the Swiss dialect of German. All the while, since starting first grade, she's been studying English. So she has a degree of fluency in 5 languages. And at the ripe old age of 15. That doesn't happen with all kids, but so she is a well-adjusted kid. She's a sophomore at the high school, and she's with her first host family. The host family the first host family for Ada right now is the family that sent out our previous last student to go out on exchange for 2019-2020. Had a girl, Chloe, who went out to France. Unfortunately, that year, students were cut short on their exchanges because of COVID. All students were called back home. But we are looking ideally for a total of 3 host families, so I'm looking for 2 more. I am available. You can, Google through the North Andover Rotary Club, or just Google my name. If you put in attorney, I'm not advertising, but you'll find me. My office is here, so you should be able to find me, my contact information. Be more than happy to speak with people, to tell them about the program. But just finally, the best way to learn about the program and to see whether it may be right for you, the students, or you, the parents, is to participate in the program by hosting a student and see firsthand how the program works. Okay, and so I will leave it at that. If anyone has any questions at the moment, be happy to respond.
Bob, I appreciate you coming in and putting you on the superintendent's report. You've been a few times, and really great opportunities for our students. So if you have any questions.
Ms. Picard, any questions?
No.
I'm just specifying because you're virtual. Any other questions on the floor?
Just a quick one. If somebody is going to host a student, how long do they host them for? Is the expectation for the full year, or do they change families?
No. We look ideally for 3 host families. We have a first host family right now.
Okay.
And so it's about roughly 3.5 months. It's not a long time, but it's long enough to form a relationship, a bond, and some of those bonds are very, very strong. Kids come back from their exchange and visit their host families. We've had some host parents be invited to their students' weddings, in time after they've done their exchange. So there are fantastic bonds that are formed.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you
Awesome.
very much.
All right.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we're really fortunate in North Andover to have partnerships with outside folks. And just a matter of a couple housekeeping items, I know we have probably a long presentation, a good one, but a long one. Partnerships like the NAAA, Nights on the Run was a big success again this, October 8th. Awesome job by NAAA. I met with the PTO presidents today. We had a really awesome opportunity to have Lisa Robertson, the head of the North Andover Parent Resource Network, and she was talking about some of the different programs offered, so we can promote that. It's in the newsletter on the website, but really terrific and timely information for parents who may need it and families in the community. And last but not least, a really great family event tonight with Bob Poirier. I think it was the 14th or 15th annual Geography Fair. It's always on the school committee night because we're always there and we have to run around and get back here. But it was awesome to see Principal Gonzalez. I saw him over there and I know he made it back. So really terrific tonight. And last but not least, next week, October 25th, CPAC is putting out a presentation on basic special education rights. So, continue to read that. We sent out the newsletter today. There's a lot of great information in it. We're just lucky to have good organizations that put these types of events on and partner with us at schools. It's what really makes North Andover special. So without further ado.
Can I just say one thing? Am I correct that this is Mr. Poirier's 14th year and last year? Is that? Okay. He's retiring. Okay, so that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's been remarkable. I saw him tonight. He was lugging things in early. The only thing tonight that did not go well and some people were disappointed is the food truck couldn't come because of the inclement weather. They weren't sure they were going to be able to. Have a big crowd out there. But Mr. Poirier has done an amazing job. Like, it's remarkable the crowd that gets there. It's so, to walk by in a middle school, to see students so excited about putting places that have been in the United States or Massachusetts or the world on a map, and the dots and just all the different, celebrating the different cultures and the diversity here in North Andover. Really awesome event. And,
Dr. Gilligan,
Yes.
who's going to be presenting that CPAC Basics Rights workshop?
Well, it's put on by CPAC. They have a special guest presenter. Holly Vitsky is presenting for CPAC. So,
Thank you.
yeah. So, and I don't know who will take over the geography fair when Mr. Poirier retires. We'll have to figure that one out. So,
We have
Big
to,
shoes to fill.
yeah.
we may bring him back.
So we have a big crowd here tonight. We have our principals here tonight from our K-8 data presentation, and we have Miss Ando, our humanities coordinator. We have Principal Gonzalez, Principal Clark, Principal Leahy. We have Principal Cushing, Principal O'Loughlin, Principal Dr. Goddard, and Principal Chris Raymond, Mr. Raymond. And at this time, we're excited to talk tonight about the progress we've made. We're excited about where we're heading as a town and a district, not only in terms of capital, but what we've been able to do with the operating budget and with recovery funds to make a difference on behalf of kids. And so, Ms. Marks, pretty exciting to have the folks in tonight to talk about last year, a lot of our internal data, where we started, where we ended up, and the difference it's making. So, Ms. Marks.
Right, good evening. And again, I'd like to just welcome our K-8 principals and our humanities coordinator. Kristen is here tonight because for the first time I am including access data in our presentation. So that is for our English learners, and Kristen oversees that program. So Kara and Ben, our STEM coordinator and our K-8 math director, had planned to be here. Kara had a death in the family and Ben got sick. So they are not here tonight. So we shifted a few things around a bit. So the focus and the lens that we're looking at in this presentation is really taking a look at our data around the question of what did our unfinished learning look like in the district last year? Where did students come in September? What did we need to target? How did we target that? And where did we end up? So the data in this presentation is last year's data. And if you could, please hold your questions until the end of the presentation. So take notes, and maybe some questions will be answered through the course of the presentation, but I think it will just make it easier if we wait till the end to ask questions. So addressing unfinished learning in 21-22. So there were a number of things that we did, and some of these were key points in addressing that unfinished learning. So we had recovery positions, both through town money and through ESSER grant money that we were able to put into our schools. And some of those that focused on academics included our K-8 math director, who I mentioned was Ben, an additional math and literacy coach at our elementary level, and new math and literacy coach at NAMS, which we haven't had before. We had additional interventionists at all of our elementary schools. And when we looked to have to either hire or replace an EL position, we did that with an EL teacher and not a tutor, as we have in the past. We have increased our assessments, so when we started doing the MAP assessment, for example, we did grades 3 through 5, and now we did K through 8 last year, so that was a big increase in that assessment piece. We looked at purchasing high-quality instructional materials. Examples of that include the Hegarty resource for Phonemic Awareness, the Geodes for decodable, accessible readers. They also build background knowledge, which goes with the new literacy pushes that we're working on. In terms of professional development, we had PD around the Hegarty resource for our teachers. We brought in Dr. Krista Doulis from Mass General Hospital to do some early literacy, phonemic awareness, and phonics PD last year. We did PD on the Geodes, and we also did some math PD. So, and I'm focusing here more on curriculum, not the SEL piece tonight. So just so that other things happened in terms of all of those areas, but this is more academic. So just to set the frame as well, students came back to school in September after approximately a year and a half of either being out of school, being virtual, or being hybrid. Even last year, we had a lot of teachers out for illness. We had a lot of students out for illness. And I'm going to say that has continued this year. I think it's okay to say we've already had some principals who've been out with COVID. We have teachers who've been out with COVID. We have students who are still out with COVID. So as much as we're trying to look at this as being all normal again, it's not, and all of that impacts teaching and learning. So just to kind of frame that. Also, we were most concerned coming into last year about our first and second graders. They are working on the foundational math and literacy skills, and having to be hybrid, so being inconsistent in that face-to-face instruction or virtual was really a challenge for them. So we really focused a lot of our energy and our attention on that first and second grade as well. So in terms of data that we're sharing tonight, it will be K through 2, the Dibbles data, and those are the only grades that we do the Dibbles in. The K through 8, as I said, MAP data, and the access scores. And what the principals will share with you is what skills were at benchmark in the fall and winter, what skills needed to be addressed, how these were addressed, and where did we end up at the end of the year. So in terms of numbers, and that you'll be looking at. So the Dibbles is a screener. It's a universal screener approved by DESE as a universal screener for dyslexia, which is a new regulation that DESE has. It is a benchmark assessment given 3 times a year, and we also use it as a progress monitoring tool for those students who may be struggling in receiving additional literacy support. We have the MAP test, which is also a benchmark assessment given 3 times a year. It's adaptive, it's nationally normed, and it is not a mastery test, thus the adaptive piece. So when we look at this data, you want to look at the MAP scores. It's important to remember that the MAP scores are still based on 2020 pre-COVID norms. Okay, so those have not been adjusted. So when we look at the comparisons and you see the charts and graphs that we're sharing, those MAP scores are pre-COVID. So kids were in school all the time at that point. For growth on the MAP, we want to see scores in the 50th percentile. For the achievement scores, we want to see 50 percentile is average, which is, you know, you want to shoot for that average. We actually, our goal is career and college ready, which would show scores in the 70th percentile. So we have both of those lines marked in the graphs that we're going to share. So just kind of a quick refresh. I know all of you have heard all of this before. So at this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Goddard and Principal Laughlin up, and then as they move out, you guys know your round. So we're going to start with the kindergarten data, and then we're going to do the elementary schools, and I kind of put them in order of the highest need school first, and then up to the school that's considered the lowest need, which doesn't mean there are no needs in that school. So I want to make that clear. But moving from highest to lowest need in the elementary, and then we'll have the middle school. All right, Dr. Goddard.
Hi, everyone. Whew, it's a little nerve-wracking being here, so I'm just going to take a deep breath first. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm excited to share some of the data that we had last year. As Lorene was saying, we added a few additional positions at the ABECC that I really think helped. One of those positions was an additional reading interventionist, so we were able to have 2 full-time interventionists who were able to support with extra groups. We also had a building-based coach, which was the first time we had that within our building, and that really, I think, was a game changer for us. We were able to have her at our weekly collaboration meetings. We had data meetings. She was able to do progress monitoring every 2 weeks. In addition, we also implemented the Hegarty resource, as Lorene was saying. We started that in both pre-K and K last year, and we also began using foundations in both kindergarten and preschool. So I'm excited to see how having a year of that last year for our current kindergartners will really boost some of their abilities. So this first data charts that you'll see here, this is for our phoneme segmenting fluency. And so we are at 69% of students meeting the benchmark for this in the spring, and 75% for the nonsense word fluency, which was, these are some of the strongest scores that I've seen in the 3 years that I've been here. The next chart here, this shows where we started in the fall, where we were in the winter, and where we were in the spring, again for both phonemic segmenting fluency and nonsense word fluency. What's interesting here is we did have a slight dip in the phoneme seg from winter to spring, that 17% difference there. We've spent a lot of time talking with the curriculum team at central office and the kindergarten team at the building, just trying to figure out what that dip was. We're not quite sure, but it's something that we're definitely going to pay close attention to this year with our progress monitoring and making sure that it doesn't happen again. We think perhaps part of it was we focused so much on the nonsense word fluency for the second part of the year because we did so well in phoneme seg in the winter that we kind of let that slide. So we need to pay closer attention to that as we go through the spring. This year switches to our MAP data. So this was the first year that we started doing the MAP testing in kindergarten. So it was new for everyone. And I think given that it was a new assessment and it was unfamiliar for a lot of us, we really worked hard to use this data thoughtfully. So for our reading, we were above where we needed to be, which was pretty exciting. And then for math, we were close, but not quite where we wanted to be. So we're working with Ben and Kara, the STEM and math coach, to help us look at both ST Math and our Eureka curriculum to better align that, to help drive our instruction, to make sure we are able to meet that goal of 50% for this school year. And then finally for our achievement percentile, so again here math was interestingly stronger on this point, and our reading was slightly lower. This is again where we're going to be using our progress monitoring data, looking at our ST Math data, and really making sure that we're using the progress monitoring to use intervention groups and thoughtfully meet our students where they're at and get them to where they need to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm going to jump right into the Dibbles for Atkinson. And looking at this data, I'm extremely proud of the progress that our students made. For the first time in a while, we are above 75% in all of these areas. And as you can see, grade 1 had 89% of students at benchmark in the phoneme segmentation fluency. And grade 2 at 85% of students at benchmark in the word reading fluency. And we are optimistic that this will continue with the implementation of the curriculum resources of Hegarty and Foundations, collaboration with our coaches who helped to support some small instructional groups throughout the year last year. Additionally, we had a reading interventionist who was able to help address more student needs in smaller groups. And we had an additional counselor who also was able to address a lot of the SEL needs, so students were available for learning. And then the growth seen from fall to spring was also exciting, especially in the area of the oral reading fluency. So there was huge growth going from 30% of students meeting the benchmark to 76% of students meeting the benchmark. And like I just mentioned, we're really optimistic that the curriculum resources that we're currently using are going to help, along with the collaboration with our coaches, the addition of the reading interventionist, the addition of the counselor. And then last week, we started during our collaboration blocks to talk about Dibbles at all grade levels, although it's only first and second grade. We felt it was important that these are all, the Atkinson students are all of our students, and just to kind of see where they're coming in, and for all grades to understand, what we're working on at the younger grade levels. And then talking about MAP, now, switching gears, we see that there's a relative strength here in math in grades 3, 4, and 5. We had cycles last year of vertical collaboration throughout the year, and we feel that this really helped because the conversation was able to continue between grade levels on how to better tailor Eureka to meet the needs of our students. Our math interventionist also was able to attend these collaborations last year, and she was able to guide a lot of the conversations to provide strategies based on the data that she was seeing, the observations she was seeing. We're definitely hoping for more growth in the area of reading. All of our teachers have chosen to begin using Wit and Wisdom this year. We've started classroom visits with our coaches. Our teachers are running PD in that, and we'll continue to work with the coaches for that piece. We also have our school-wide professional practice goal of peer observations, which we did last year, and we're hoping to continue. We are going to continue that this year, but we're hoping to be able to have more peer observations on the Wit and Wisdom to help improve our comprehension in addition to our phonetic skills. Again, we saw a relative strength in grades 3, 4, and 5, but in addition to math, it was also in reading. In regards to math, we're hoping to have our math interventionists, math coaches, and directors work closely with our teachers again this year to identify further needs that we're seeing, really bringing it down to the individual students and looking at the data and finding, okay, what are the individual needs? And now we're going to run these small groups. In regards to our reading, we're hoping that the foundational skills that we're seeing in grades 1 and 2 will carry over to the higher level grades, and that Haggerty and Foundations, along with Wit and Wisdom, will, like I said, increase the comprehension scores also, along with the vertical collaboration that we're going to continue in grade level collaboration this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Chris Raymond, principal at the Thompson Elementary, and I'm very excited to highlight the tremendous work of our staff and our wonderful Thompson Tigers from the year. So the overall theme at Thompson really includes several strengths and areas where we continue to work towards proficiency. Our future focus continues to be growth for all students and continued progress. Our teachers and support staff are working very diligently with the curriculum resources that we've been provided. And in looking at this slide, considering that phoneme segmentation is a foundational skill for reading and writing, we're looking forward to seeing the future progress of our last year's first graders as they go forward with that 85% phoneme segmentation on Dibbles. So now we can look at the progress in each of the previous areas over the course of the year. Last year at Thompson, we added a reading interventionist. The collaboration really between the reading interventionists as a team and with the grade level teachers was really impressive. I believe the additions to the reading team, the teacher collaboration throughout the year, support from the district literacy coaches, our targeted work, utilizing the curriculum resources, and a lot of real high-quality Tier 1 instruction in our first and second grades really contributed to the success of the students over the year. Of note is the oral reading fluency, which represents the coming together of many different skills, and considering, as Lorene mentioned, where students came from the prior year and a half, it was a little bit of a longer hill this year, but I'm really happy for our staff and kids in looking at those ORF numbers for first and second grade and accuracy at the end of the year. I think the students are going to be well primed to continued success going forward. So now we can see the students' growth according to the MAP assessment from fall to spring.
Our students demonstrated strengths, particularly in math at the 3, 4, 5 level, with our reading being slightly above proficiency in almost all cases, with that first grade, right there at 49%. They were so close. So we will certainly continue to keep working with them and all students. And on this last slide, we move from the fall to spring graphic to the overall snapshot for the year in the 2 content areas from spring. And once again, we're over 50% in all areas, with that grade 1 math super close at 47%. And we're continuing to work towards that 70% proficiency. It's important to note, last year we added a math interventionist at Thompson. And the interventionist, our district coach, worked really closely with teachers primarily at the 3, 4, and 5 level. Our interventionist was terrific in terms of constantly reviewing the data. She had a nice blend of push-in and pull-out work based on the data throughout the year. She was one of our 5th grade teachers, so she had a lot of experience in math. Math is her love, so she was the right person for the job. She collaborated really closely with the teachers and myself and the other interventionists throughout the year. The Thompson teachers regularly reviewed their data and instruction, and they often welcomed Claire O'Connor, our district math coach, into their classrooms for modeling feedback and suggestions. I was really happy with the openness of the Thompson staff and really being able to talk about and have folks come into the classroom. I believe the addition of the math interventionists, regular reviews of data, and district math coach support contributed to our success. And as we go forward, our math coach and interventionists are going to continue to be vital in supporting the staff. And in fact, Claire O'Connor, our math coach, is already working with teachers in all grades this year, so she's extending to 1st and 2nd. And I was actually part of a couple meetings just today where teachers were reviewing their Module 1 math assessments with her. Finally, the last thing I wanted to let you know is one of our school goals this year is supporting our staff to visit other classrooms. And as you know, observing peers can give one a new perspective, really increase collaboration, strengthen the school culture, openness, community, and finally really look at high quality Tier 1 instruction. A lot of our staff have it as an evaluation goal this year. My job as principal is to make sure I support that goal through regular visits and support in terms of coverage for our teachers, which is not always an easy thing to do right now, but it's something that I need to provide for them so they can do what they need to do to be the best they can be. I'm proud to work with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good evening, and it's nice to be here. I'd like to start with the first slide and just talk about, if you look at the Kittredge, Spring, Dibbles, and MAP reading scores for 1st grade, they really speak to the progress and improvements that the students had made. We had a lot of great successes last year with our 1st grade. There's also, when you look at the data, there was a solid transfer of skills from 1st grade to our 2nd grade, resulting in a strong oral reading fluency by the end of 2nd grade. As you can see, 98% of our 2nd grade students were at benchmark. On slide 2, you can notice while at the end of the year, Dibbles data is solid, a closer look at the data, really reveals that there was a decrease in correct letter sound and oral reading fluency in 1st grade. This became a topic of discussion at a 1st grade collaboration meeting. We kind of sat down and looked at some of the kids that were falling below benchmark and what was it that we had to do. At our collaboration meetings, we always, invite coaches as well as directors, for their input and their support. At one of the collaboration meetings, the first thing that we came up with was Katie Barnett, who is our primary grade FCI, put together a training for 1st and 2nd grade TAs, teacher assistants, on the Hegarty Phonemic Awareness program. This really allowed the TAs to provide interventions with one small group of children, while the classroom teacher was able to work with another small group. In addition, a dedicated team of teachers and TAs, along with our guidance counselor, volunteered their time for an 8-week after-school reading program. The students attended the program 2 days a week for an hour and a half each day. I'd like to just take a moment just to thank some of those people. Katie Barnett, Sarah Laporte, 2 of our first grade teachers, Daniel Hersey, who has an expertise in reading, one of our third grade teachers, also dedicated time, Carla Doolin, and then one of our language-based classroom TAs, Cheryl Means, also. So we had a lot of really great professional people that were helping us with the program, so you can see what the end result is, you know. Also, Angela Jennings, you know, our reading interventionist, did an unbelievable job with progress monitoring the students, you know, during this time. And so, I mean, as you can see, when you have a team approach with, first of all, data analysis, grade level collaboration, intervention, and progress monitoring, it does make an unbelievable difference. Also, we got a lot of extra help last year with our ELL students. We always, at Kittredge, we were sharing, you know, some of the ELL tutors that would come to the school. They would be here for an hour this day, an hour that day. And I have to say, thank you, Kristen Endo, for helping us, you know, secure, you know, some funding so that we could have the ELL tutor actually based right at Kittredge. And it really has helped, you know, our ELL students last year, and then we look forward to seeing that continued support this year. When you look at the third slide, Kittredge hit the 50% growth goal for math at all grade levels, with a particularly strong performance again in grade 1. The addition of a math interventionist at our school certainly contributed to our achievement in math. You know, we're really fortunate because Gail Kellaway, who was a classroom teacher at Kittredge, you know, also has a very, very strong math background, and at one point in time was a math interventionist, you know, back when she started, you know, with North Andover. And because of her ability to, you know, as a classroom teacher, she was a second grade teacher and a third grade teacher. She has a real clear understanding of, and she also has an ELL background. So she actually has assumed that role of the ELL tutor at our school too. So that whole concept of the interventionists has really had an unbelievable impact on our primary grades and actually through third grade. The 50% growth goal for reading was achieved by grades 1 through 3, with another strong performance by grade 1. Grade 4 just missed the growth goal by 1%, and grade 5 is significantly below that mark. It is important to note, however, that 5th grade went from having no MCAS in 3rd grade, just 2 sessions of MCAS in 4th grade, 1 ELA, 1 math, to 6 sessions in 5th grade, 2 ELA, 2 math, 2 science, and then the following week after science, we administered the 2 sessions of MAP testing. And I have to say that I really feel that that totally impacted, you know, the scores. We've never seen scores like this for our 5th grade. And we really feel strongly that, you know, there was a lot of test exhaustion that had occurred. It also probably didn't help that we were going to do our 5th grade trip the following week either. However, and their minds were on other things. However, you know, when we look at, you know, when we look at our Mcat scores this year, and I don't want to get into that, but, you know, we definitely did
remarkably well with
But I will.
our fifth grade.
That's a
But I will.
guys.
Our fifth, well, it's just that, I'm telling you, honestly, to see that 31%, right, was a shocker. It absolutely was, you know? So, I mean, so when we finally got the MCAS results, I was mightily happy to see that, that the same reflection wasn't there, you know, which is really nice. And so, but in response to, you know, the 31%, all three of our fifth grade teachers are early adopters of the Wit and Wisdom reading program, and fifth grade collaboration meetings this year will focus on ELA. We've already done our first round of map testing, and we've got the results, and we are going to examine some of that tomorrow at our collaboration. So, all right. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, Sergeant's up there. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you. I just have to say, if Rich Cushing can mention MCAS, I'd like to say that we did our fun run today. And the fun run, we had 500 kids, and then the rain came, and then we improvised. So a shout out to our PTO and the parents that improvised really quickly. I have to try to match Cushing in everything that I do. I'm delighted to tell you about some of our data. But also, I'm listening, and I want to respect the brevity of the time that we have to talk, but I want to just give you a little glimpse of what's happening at Sargent, because as Lorene mentioned when we first started talking, we're all united together. As you can see, our data is very similar in the structures of what we look at for data, but each one of us has some unique stories in our buildings. And so it's hard to give a little glimpse in 5 minutes, but I'm hoping to give you a couple highlights. So we too are echoing what other schools, which is a reflection to me of what the district has done really thoughtfully in putting together the coaches. I can't say enough about them, but the ways that we're looking at data together in a unified way. So we have shared in some of the same successes in first and second grade with the percent of Dibbles achievement in first and second grade. I, too, will say a big plug for the 1.0 reading interventionist. At Sargent, we made the decision to pull one of our most veteran first grade teachers, Joni Coleman, who's also degreed in reading, 27-year veteran first grade teacher, and she stepped into the role of 1.0 reading interventionist. Already knew the kids that were moving up into second grade, knew the teams of grade level teams, all 8 teachers that she was working with, and a huge impact. The teachers even said best data they've ever received, best, quickest assessments in Dibbles. So it was a real team effort that way. So that was a huge marker for us. I know other principals have talked about it, but boy, would I hope that that remains for us to have a 1.0. So from the Dibbles, the percent of benchmark students in first and second grade, and then the second grade, same thing. We're really pleased to see the 83 in second grade for the, I'm trying to come up again. Thank you, nonsense words. The 8 o'clock's getting me a little bit. And the, help me out, Lorene, too, on the next one. The, yeah, thank you. I have it right here. So we're really pleased with that. We opened our first PD in August with the whole team of all 70 of us in the cafeteria. And I said, let's start with successes. And so what we really focused on, and with me still being a really earnest student in data and embracing it and understanding it more thoroughly, I couldn't do it without the coaches and with Lorene and Kristen helping me to understand it. But because we could open school and say the success of what we targeted and focused on in first and second grade, we moved the needle. And we moved it because we could continue to see the data through map testing 3 times a year that was really successful for the teachers. And it's a great buildup of your muscle to say, when we work collaboratively and we focus on one thing, it's a goal that gets done. So that moves us to the second slide, which is similar with the other schools, that we have the phoneme segment in first grade and at 95 from the fall, winter, and spring. And again, I attribute that to the emphasis, small groups, using the coaches, the new hire, Nicole Rindowski, again, a veteran teacher that's now a reading interventionist. She's in classrooms all day long. I know at other schools, but we always tap into her, and the teachers are getting more comfortable using the coaches and opening their doors to them. So that's been hugely impactful, as you can see. And then the student growth percentile at Sargent from fall to spring. This is where we see what we have to work on, and that we know what's coming. When we think about where we were 3 years ago at the start of COVID and where we're finishing out, hopefully we're all done, that we can see, we knew that there were going to be unfinished learning, but we're understanding more and more the use of the data to be able to drive how we're going to look at the pockets and the holes that we want to see achieved. But we're enjoying the successes, but recognizing that we have work to do, certainly with math. And but our focus this year, I just want to talk briefly about the SMART goal for teachers and what we're doing unified ways. So the last slide is the student achievement percentile for Sargent. And again, that will show the math, reading, and you can see that, you know, we've had some success. We're pleased with where we're going, but we know that there's unfinished business and work for us to do and unfinished learning for the students. So if I can just indulge you for 1 minute more, I just want to tell you my brief little story about what is Sargent, a little bit different from just a similar data. So 5 years ago when I started, now almost 6, as principal, with the help of Kristen Ando, we took an old former kindergarten room and we made it into a data room. And we got magnets from almost 500 kids in the room. Everyone had their section for first grade, second grade. We were getting things rolling. We had a goal focus. At the time, it was Dibbles and making sure we were showing fidelity to it. That, again, was the help with Kristen, and then the coaches breaking out to make sure teachers were doing it in a unified way. And then this thing called a pandemic hit. We couldn't meet for the collaboration meetings to start looking at the data specifically and how they relate to each student. And now, very happily, I tell you that the room's back up and open, and we're meeting collectively as groups of grade level teams of, four teachers, 2 coaches, myself, and the reading interventionist and the special education teachers are coming in. So if you're picking up my theme, the theme is all of us are smarter than one of us. I say it to the teachers all the time. It's a team effort. And I just believe that I think it just deserves a couple seconds of highlight of the team effort, not just from Sargent School, when we build a framework to say the focus was on the Dibbles at the start of last year and then small group. The focus this year is again with the reading and that we're going to do. We're pushing in with the math. But I also want to highlight that we have to remember when we started with COVID and the kids came back to school to talk about first and second graders, that we had students who hadn't been in school for 3 years. So a dear kindergarten teacher used to say, don't worry, by the time Halloween comes, they all settle into established routines and they know what's going on. We all can agree it took us till probably March to get the kids ready to fully attend. And so that was a framework we developed and the district did that we've really shown fidelity to, and that's the responsive classroom resource. So every classroom has a cool down corner. Every classroom now is using the same chimes so that the kids are responding in a way with some more consistencies. The great work the district has done by providing us with stipends for FCI, so we have teachers who are really passionate about it, who have more extensive experience. They're able to be the FCIs and leaders. They're pushing into classrooms. And so that, and then the last thing I got to say, and this goes on Lorene and Kristen again, and Gilly because he supported it, is the Boston College, the Lynch School of Leadership that we've all been asked to go to for the last 2 years. No, that's pushed us because all of us are smarter than one of us. And when you get all of us in the room and then you're able to bring in the FCIs once or twice a month, we're actually talking about the map of where we're going with it. So I hope all those resources remain. And and so the last thing too is just that we're doing a SMART goal where teachers are mandated or directed by me to do 3 class visits per year. I'm asking them to do 2 within their grade level teams for up to an hour at a time, and then 1 in the grade level that's below them or above them, in order to see if we can provide some more consistency. And the really last thing is the boys behind me that are here for their badges. This fine sophomore that I was just talking to, I said, "Why are you here?" And he said, "For my badge in communication." So I hope I didn't burn out his image of what
You
that badge
provided
should
him a
look
lot of
like.
examples. That's how we look.
I had to outdo Cushing, sorry.
You did. 1 minute longer than
You look like you're gonna get up and ditch me up here.
Well, I'll stay, Joe. I'll stay.
Wow, the blessing and the curse of going last is that a lot of the things have been said. That BC thing was mine. I've been hanging on to that, and then the last few seconds you come in with it. I'll reiterate. Thank you. First, thanks. First of all, thanks for having us. Welcome back to everybody. It's nice to be back in the building and in person with all of you. It's been a long time. So a lot of what everybody said, we've been working on too. The collaboration every morning, it's great. What Karen referenced, I guess I'll reiterate, what Karen referenced with the Lynch leadership through BC that Laureen and Kristen have going with us is incredible. And then we combine that with our equity work that we're also doing. So we're really looking at all of our students and making sure we're hitting that strategic plan as best we can to make sure we're figuring out not only how are we addressing their academic needs, how are we addressing their social emotional needs, and how are we combining the two to really look at the whole child. We were fortunate. We increased from a 0.5 reading interventionist to a 1.0, and we can see in the data that we've had some success in first and second grade last year. Everything is above 80%, which I'm really proud of. That's not just the reading interventionists, that's also the hard work of all of our first and second grade teachers and special ed teachers and everybody who works with those younger students. Our higher marks on each of those grade levels happens to be the nonsense word fluency, which, if I'm completely honest with myself, when I was a second grade teacher, I was kind of like, "Why? Cool, they can read fake words." But it really actually is an incredible indicator of their ability to read, understand, and apply the phonetic principles. And when you think about what a 93% at benchmark in second grade in that is going into third grade, when you're thinking about making that switch from learning to read to reading to learn, and you're encountering these words in these contexts that you've never encountered before, essentially, they're nonsense words to your brain because you've never seen it before, you've never heard it before. And how can I use what I know? How can I use those skills to apply my knowledge to figure out what that word is and use everything I have to help me excel? And as we look into the next slide, and we see all our bars going in the right direction, which is awesome. Again, that nonsense word fluency stands out. But what I'd like to point out about that too is if we look at where second grade was at the beginning of last year, 80%, when we look at first grade ending last year at 88%, in theory, and we'll just ignore whatever a summer slide may be, they're hopefully starting at around 88%. So they're that much ahead of the game than the class was before. So we're hoping to see that much more of an increase this year. With the integrity that we're using, with the Haggerty and the foundations and the geodes and the implementation of wit and wisdom as we move forward, and all of the decodable work that goes along with that as well in the complex texts. So when we look at our growth, I'm happy with math. Math breached that 50% mark across the board. First and third really did a nice job, and they're even approaching that 70% mark. ELA, consistent with what we're seeing kind of across the nation right now, but there's definitely room for growth, especially in that fourth grade, which is a bit of an anomaly for our school. So what we've been looking at is how are we utilizing all of the resources available to us? How are we utilizing Lexia? For math, how are we utilizing ST Math to help enhance those skills and contribute to the whole child teaching that we're trying to do on a daily basis? like Rich said, not the MCAS stuff, but like Rich said, we just finished MAP, and we're looking at that in 4th grade, and I have a meeting on Tuesday to kind of review how that is and where we're starting there and what the plan will be for this group of students moving forward and how we can make sure that we see more growth when I'm sitting here next year as we approach that 50 percentile. And then again, happy with the achievement at the Franklin. We are just about at the goal in all grade levels. Like Chris was saying, like that 2nd grade, it's just right there at 69 percentile. But that's really good, and we're happy with that. We're happy with the work that we've been doing, and we think about wit and wisdom now, right? I'm not convinced that everything is necessarily going to go up. When we have a first year of a new curricular resource, there's always struggles, right? As we learn it, everybody's learning it together. The students are learning it, the teachers are learning it, the parents are learning it. If we think back to that first year we adopted Eureka and nobody knew what a number bond was or a tape diagram, and parents were sweating and emailing teachers, what is this math? We don't know it. It took a couple years to get that going, and you can see as we reap the benefits, combining that with our ST math, combining that with our tier 1 support, with our intervention block, where it's an opportunity for our students on individualized education plans to get their C-grid services without missing new instruction. That's a prime opportunity. We call it WIN because it's what I need. All students get what they need at that time. We're looking at strategic groups for math. We're looking at strategic groups for reading and writing and all of those different aspects of the day that, because of the complexity and the integrity with which we use our programs, having that little buffer, it's 45 minutes, but 45 minutes to be able to really hone in on what each and every student needs is incredible. And that's what we look at when we're looking at those collaboration meetings, is what does this individual child need and how are we addressing it, and who can we group with them to build them up and build everybody else up at the same time. That's it. I'm nothing if not brief. Always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
I was going to be sitting alone, Kristen. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm George Gonzalez, the proud principal of NAMS. As a middle child, the role of middle school principal serves me well. When I think of the word hybrid, I feel like it's describing my role as a middle school principal, being that person between elementary and high school. We're a factory over there at NAMS. We take rising 5th graders and turn them into incoming 9th graders in 3 short years. And the experience at the middle school level is catered to the child. How we approach teaching 6th grade versus 7th grade versus 8th grade is very different. And utilizing that team model, working together to, what Karen says it well, it's that team effort, it's the team approach, many hands make light work, and that has been a serious focus at NAMS. We want the curricular experience to be very similar for students, regardless of what team they're on across a grade level, and that requires a lot of partnership with veteran teachers who have been at this game for a long time. It requires a humbling experience. It requires you to take a hard look at what you do and to look across the table and see how someone else is doing it, and maybe recognizing that that might be a better way. That might be a better way of doing it. So we've been doing a lot of that. Before I begin talking about map data, it's always good to know who the kids are in front of you. And the data you're looking at represents students who were in school full-time for the first time last year. Kids who had to wear masks until I think it was April 28th. These are kids who the previous year were hybrid twice a week with remote asynchronous instruction on Wednesdays. And there are also kids who the year before had their school closed on March 13th, I believe was the date, and were virtual for the rest of their 5th grade or 6th grade or 7th grade years. So when Karen, again I'll quote, when she said, oh, by October, by Halloween they got it, and it was more like March. Honestly, I think it was more like June before our kids. Our focus last year was very much on teaching kids how to be students again. So when I look at the 3 positions that NAMS was able to hire, we had an adjustment counselor, we had a literacy coach, and we had a math coach. That adjustment counselor was so needed. Our kids came to school with underdeveloped skills. I felt as though both adults and students, their ability to deal with discomfort last year was immeasurable. They could not handle discomfort. They did not build those coping strategies that you develop when you're all together in large settings working collaboratively. Our teachers couldn't even teach students collaboratively. The students had to be apart, and okay, fine, you can have them work together, but set the timer, because after less than 15 minutes they have to go back, or else they're considered a close contact. So it really, for a school that really prided itself on collaborative learning, we had to go to models that we hadn't used in a long time. So that's a little bit about the students in front of us. Our teachers focus their instruction on building the necessary foundational skills to teach that grade level content. The state frameworks told us what we had to teach the students, but what those frameworks didn't tell us was whether or not the students had the foundational skills necessary to teach that. So everything you approach to teach, did they have the necessary knowledge and skills to enter into that? And our teachers had to identify the most important, most necessary frameworks and really focus on that. It's better to teach a mile deep than it is an inch deep and a mile across. So our teachers focused on that. Our math coach and literacy coaches, they're in their second year at NAMS. Last year, we were juggling. What should they do? Should they simply be coaches and work with teachers? We wanted that to happen, but instead we identified kids whose needs were so high that they would have difficulty accessing the curriculum in the best differentiated classroom in the world. So we had to use our coaches to do both. So our coaches, we were able to identify students who needed significant remediations and interventions and schedule them for small groups. And they were able to be in those groups for a trimester, 2 trimesters, or 3 trimesters. And kids came in and out based on their need. Simultaneously, those same coaches were also working with teams, departments, and grade level content areas to make sure that we were all working together and learning from each other. This year, we continue to employ the small group interventions and remediations, but the need for as many isn't as much. So now they're working more with the gen ed teachers. They're pushing in. They're co-teaching, they're co-planning, and we're seeing the benefits of that. When I look at MAP was relatively new for us. Only our special education students were administered MAP, and then we went to administering it to everyone. We have the pleasure at NAMS of administering MAP and MCAS to every single person in the school. So when it was time to stuff envelopes to send home with MCAT scores, and people were like, 250 envelopes, 1,040, baby. That's how many we had to stuff, and so that they can go home tomorrow. So that's everyone, and it's a Herculean task to test the whole school. When I look at the data, I'm not surprised by it. This is the data that we expected. What's not in this data is those individual student growths. When you look at it by teacher, which you can't do, when you look at it by student, which you can't do, and you look at it globally, it doesn't tell the whole story. Those kids who were in those small group intervention classes, again, we're not supposed to talk about MCAS yet, but 82nd percentile for growth, 90 percentile for growth. So it shows when you can really put in that additional time, that additional support, that's how you make up lost learning. And our teachers had to choose wisely what they were going to focus in on. So that was fall to spring growth, what you're looking at. Believe it or not, the winter growth, we showed a big spike and then a little regression in the spring. There's a lot of confounding variables to go with that. I'll echo what one of my colleagues, Rich Cushing, said. We were also on overload assessments. The way we schedule MCAS at NAMS, they give us the window for MCAS. We push it out as far as we can, barely giving ourselves enough time to do makeups, because we want to make sure as much teaching and learning happens before we administer MCAS. But then you just put yourself up against the map testing window, and because of our schedule and our end-of-year events, we had to test map later, which meant the kids were taking map tests the week before school ended, and gave us very little time to do makeups. We didn't even finish all the makeups for map. So I don't believe that this data is a true reflection of how our students could perform and did perform. And then when I look at MCAS, again, not here to talk about MCAS, but that's a different story. That's a different story. So, well, I said the words, but I didn't tell stories about MCAS. And I didn't give any percentages. I didn't give any information. So we also, the elementary principals talk about collaboration meetings. We call them content area meetings. It's the same thing. If you don't already know, our grade level content area teachers meet once a week, 45 minutes every week. And one of our next tasks is to look at the map results, look at the 4 categories that the map data yields, and use that as the lens by which we look at future planning and developing of lessons. We're going to be doing that. We finish map testing tomorrow, then next week it's makeups, so it would be the week after we would start looking at individual student results. At NAMS, as a middle school, similar to the high school, we have a team of teachers who teach their own content area. At the elementary level, a teacher can flex their schedule. We're going to do additional time with math at the expense of science or social studies, same with English, same with reading. At the middle school, you have 45 minutes of each of those classes. So the answer or the response to that, sure, is the coaches, but it's also that team effort again, quoting the great Karen Leahy. It's the team effort of making sure we all own what we can support. So just like we just did a detailed MCAS presentation at the last English department and math department, we're going to be doing that at the social studies department meeting, because they too own their ability to increase those English language arts scores, because there's a lot of reading and writing and social studies, if you remember any course you've ever taken. So we need to work together. What is the approach to teaching writing in English? Let's use that same approach in social studies. Together we can help these students. Also in science, there is a science exam. It's given only in 8th grade, but we need to look at how we're teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And our curricular model right now allows students to not have only been taught something in 6th grade and never again. It's like, if you miss the bus, don't worry, 8 minutes from now, or a T stop would probably make more sense, or the metro in Europe. Don't worry, in 8 minutes another one's coming by. Those students can still have the opportunity to regain their missed learning. So I'm excited to see what our MAP scores are this fall. I'm excited to see what those MAP scores look like in the winter. I'm excited to see what they look like in the spring. But what I'm most excited about is to get the students that are coming out of these elementary schools, where reading has become just something that together everyone is working on and working to improve, and the results speak for themselves. Because having kids with that phonological awareness, knowledge, when they're supposed to be learning it, and then come to middle school with those skills, because as you probably know, it's very hard to teach phonics once they get to middle school. So the fact that that's happening means our students will be coming to middle school ready to embrace and grapple with that more complex curriculum and content. Why do I turn everything into a rah-rah speech? I'm sorry, folks.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kristen Ando, and I am your Humanities Director. Also very proud director of our EL or ML, our Multilingual Learner Program, and that because we very much see our multilingual learners from an asset-based perspective. And so I am a retail instructor in my former life, and so I'm very proud director of our ML program here. And so we can turn. The access test is the federal and state law requires the English learner students be assessed annually, reading, writing, listening, speaking the 4 domains of language, as well as their progress, a benchmark that is set by the DESE for language acquisition. Thanks, Jim. This is a beautiful graph of the primary languages spoken in our homes here for our entire community of North Andover. It's about 30 different home languages. And so this is really exciting. I think this is a big, beautiful picture of our students and the assets that they're bringing to school. This is a graph of the home languages of our multilingual learners, so within the program. So the students that are enrolled in our multilingual learner program. These are the main languages, with Spanish about 40% of our students, and followed by Portuguese about 30%, and then some lower incidence languages following that. This is, so Access measures proficiency and growth, very similar to MAP and the other assessments we've been talking about. Access goes on a scale of 1 to 6, with 1 being a score where someone who is newer to English, 6 being closer to a native English speaker, and this is how our students broke down on their overall or their composite score. In order to be considered to exit our multilingual anyway, our ML program, excuse me, a child needs to score a 4.2 as a composite score. And so to be considered to exit. And so this is how our scores are overall. These are percentage of students scoring in each domain. You can see 1 to 6 at the bottom, entering being newer to English, reaching being closer to a native language speaker, with the 4 domains, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Our EL team was actually just looking at this data this week. As you can see, there's a spike in the green bar in writing in our developing category, and so our EL teachers were looking at how to support students in that particular domain in a more targeted way, and so they're building their goals around that this year. These are the percentage of students meeting their goals on Access. So there's a proficiency score and also a growth score. So in 2021, 45% of our students met their goals. Their goals set by the state as far as language acquisition on Access. In 2022, we had 64% of our students townwide meet those goals. You can see the number of students tested and the students included in growth. A student has to have at least 2 years of the Access test in order to have a growth score. This is something I would like to celebrate. We have a few schools who are above the district average for growth. So our North Andover Public district average is 64%. The Atkinson School, we had 87% of our students meeting their Access growth goals. And at North Andover High, we had 100% of our students meeting their language growth goals, which we're very proud of. And as we build the team, we're very excited that we're having these outcomes for kids. Just for some updates, again, I mentioned building the team. It's been referenced earlier in the meeting that we're trying to move from tutors to teachers being included in the budget. Those were example of some of the places we were able to hire teachers. We are trying to replace them one by one. We recently hired a new teacher at the ABECC and at the high school, and then someone to split between Franklin and Sargent. So we're very excited about those people joining our team. Our team is small but mighty. We have purchased curriculum materials specifically for language acquisition. We use Reach Higher in the elementary, Inside in the middle, and Edge at the high school. And we are also working on alignment with the WIDA ELD standards with the team and incorporating those into our new ELA resource that we're using, Wit and Wisdom. You've heard a little bit about it, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So just again, a reminder that, the presentation was focusing on where we started last year and the growth that we made. And again, a reminder, I know that when looking at the MAP scores, we have to remember that those were 2020 pre-COVID norms that they're based on. So Rich missed our meeting when we all the principals went through this, so everybody knew that we weren't talking about MCAS today because it muddies the waters, and I forgot to tell him that today when I talked to him.
I'm just saying
Yeah.
that 31% just killed me.
You will
Can't
see,
help himself.
yeah, you will see when we do talk about MCAS that our MCAS scores actually do look better than our MAP scores, and there's supposed to be a correlation between the two. And one of the things that we talked about as curriculum leaders, myself, is that reflective of the fact that that MAP test is still based on pre-COVID norms. So, anyway, I think at this point, if people would like to ask questions, we can entertain those.
Want to start virtually, Ms. Picard?
So I'm going to say the opposite of Jill Clark. It's hard to go first because I have so many questions and I don't want to either monopolize the time or, take everybody else's questions. But
Do you want someone else to go first?
no, I'll start and perhaps you'll circle back to me. I would start by saying that I really do wish that we had the spring 21 data to compare to what happened, because that's really when they came in. On Dibbles, we say how many have reached the benchmark. What % do we want to reach the benchmark? Do we have an expectation or a goal for that? Do we expect more than 50% to reach the benchmark? Are we expecting, is this standards-based where we want everyone to reach that goal? Is this a bell curve? What are we looking for there?
So ideally, Helen, we would love to have 100%. We want all of our kids to reach the benchmark. That doesn't happen, I don't think, anywhere. So because you do have students who have difficulty learning how to read and struggle with that, whether it's through reading intervention or those students that require special education because they may have a learning disability in terms of reading. So no one ever reaches 100%, but that is our goal. I've been here for a while. We've talked about Dibbles scores in past meetings, and I can say we've never seen scores as strong as we are seeing them right now, and we expect that to continue to grow. I do think one of the big pieces that has supported that is this whole phonemic awareness piece. And prior to bringing Hegarty in, we, the literacy team, read a big fat book about phonemic awareness, did a study, talked about what that means in terms of our instruction, and then we wrapped some of the reading teachers into that the following year. But we really spent some time learning about what this means, what the impact is, and how to support the teachers with that. And if I can say, I know a lot of the principals have mentioned this, the advantage of the coaches and the data work. Without those people, you don't have the time. Like the principals, I was a principal, and I'm telling you, they're talking about all of this data. Some of their days, they have not a minute to look at this or to look at instruction because there's a lot of other things going on in those buildings. There's tremendous social emotional needs in those buildings. There's a lot of other things going on. So the fact that we've been able to, and the district has supported these positions coming in, has helped to support the principals and the teachers looking at this data and figuring out what makes sense. You wouldn't be able to have them sit down and read that big fat book and figure out what's going on. Much of that work we did in the summer as well. So that support is important, and I think you've heard that as we've talked about this. It just isn't a possibility to have people with their other jobs and all of those expectations to be able to do that. So ideally 100%, does anybody in any district reach that? No, because there are students who struggle to learn to read and who truly have a learning disability. However, hopefully with this work, we are going to have fewer kids identified as having a learning disability because there probably have been students who have been misidentified. So.
Thank you. That's helpful. And then just some definitions and vocabulary. It would be helpful to me, I'm sure it'd be helpful to the public when we have these presentations when it says PSF and NWF and ORF. I gleaned over the course of this that means phoneme segment fluency and nonsense word fluency and oral reading fluency. But just having that written somewhere would be helpful so that when somebody looks back at this or looks forward at it, it has that kind of information. You also said that you had the elementary schools present from highest need to lowest need. What does that mean? How do you define what's
in terms of
what kind of need?
All needs in terms of socioeconomic, learning needs. So we know that Atkinson and Thompson are Title I schools, so they have a little more additional support. So that's what we're talking about. Who requires the most support?
Thank you, that's helpful. And then I heard folks talking about how helpful the interventionists and the coaches were. My understanding, an interventionist works directly with students, a coach works with teachers who work with students. And we added a whole bunch of folks. If I recall correctly from the budget process, all those people were added as FTEs in our regular budget, right? It's no longer an outside budget. Did we lose anybody in our budgeting?
I don't believe they're all in our regular budget right now. We still have grant money, ESSER money, but the plan is to try to incorporate those positions into our regular operating budget.
I think the incredible part is this, Helen, is that, you guys know what the budget increases were previous to COVID. Last year, we had a 5.34% budget increase. The year before, we got $2.6 million to spend in recovery services, and we roughly spent about $2 million on staffing. Last year, with that 5.34% budget increase, in the operating budget was roughly $1.2 million. That's like in perpetuity, more than half of the positions, and then we had just a slightly over $1 million with ESSER funding, and as we move forward and identify how these needs have impacted kids, because these are positions we never had in North Andover, and Lorraine's right. People are working very hard, but we never had the coaches or the interventionists. Adding the 6.5 interventionists, 4.5 in reading, 2 in mathematics, totally makes a difference. And with a similar increase next year, we'll be on track to have the positions that are necessary for kids to achieve, and for students to be supported, for staff to be supported, for principals to be supported. And it's a tremendous team effort, and you, school committee, really helped make that happen, along with the town and everyone in this room. So,
thank you. I have 2 more kind of general questions. One is with regards to NAMS. Does NAMS look at what happened with the 5th graders so that when they have their 6th graders coming in, they're able to address that? And how long has it been since we've looked at the NAMS schedule, and is that something that needs to be reviewed?
In regards to...
And those don't necessarily all have to be answered right away, but are you looking back at the 5th grade data?
The short answer to that is yes. So when we have data meetings, with teachers for them to see how their students from last year did, so that they can compare how the students did specifically in certain areas, and then they can reflect upon their own teaching and say, aha, see, we only taught that this way, this long, and look at the scores, we might want to revisit. Number sense was an area of need, so we need to intersperse that throughout the year as opposed to just, isolating it. And then that's one portion of the data meetings. The second portion is, okay, now let's look at the kids in front of you. So we will look at the current 6th graders, how they performed on map testing last year, how they performed on MCAS last year, how they're performing in class this year. We're trying to learn as much as we can about the kids to preemptively address their needs, not wait until we find out what they are. We want to pass the baton every single year using the data we have. And then as far as the schedule goes, there are no plans in the immediate future to reevaluate the schedule at NAMS. I believe that we want to, continue the good work we're doing, and if a review of the schedule is necessary, we can certainly entertain that. But I believe strongly that we have great folks at NAMS doing great work. We just have to make sure we're all working together and rowing together. If you've ever read Boys in a Boat, get that swing.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's very helpful.
Helen, I'm not sure if your question on the schedule is related to George's comment about 45 minutes, and I believe you're in teams so that you could actually modify times.
Yes.
So when you were referring in the elementary school, they are able to modify. My understanding has always been that because you're on teams in the middle school, if the English teacher was doing something in particular or wanted to address something in particular, that person could have a longer time period and someone else, be it whatever, might adjust that on the team. Is that what you were referring to, Helen?
Yeah, and I think we have addressed the schedule a little bit with regards to the applied math and science was a way to get more time on math and science. So
And
that,
we consistently
that's helpful,
see
what
that
you said.
we consistently see the 7th grade math scores both on MAP and on MCAS better. So
Yeah, it's fascinating to me that when kids were still remote, we were very concerned about math scores, and we were seeing reading look like it was holding on. But now looking at these, it looks like math has had a faster recovery than reading seems to be having at this point.
And when DESE provided opportunities for acceleration academies, or again, I'm not going to get into a lot of MCAS information tonight, but this is what they've seen across the state, and they anticipated that the math scores would come up and the math skills would rebound much quicker than literacy. Literacy is a much more complex process than the math. So,
thank you. That's helpful. And then, another general question. I realize I don't know that much about multilingual learners. Was a new phrase for me tonight. Does that totally replace EL? And when we're talking about kids exiting from that program, is that a substantially separate classroom all-day experience for kids, or are they in and out with native speakers, or are they only with multilingual learners all day? I guess I don't really know that much.
So multilingual is a newer term, and it celebrates the fact that these students speak more than one language. Rather than saying you need to learn English, it's celebrating the fact that they can speak sometimes multiple languages, like the gentleman who was here from Rotary talked about the girl that speaks 5 languages. And no one is in a totally substantially separate program who is learning to, or newer to English, learning to speak English. We are working with all of our interventions, whether it's special ed, the multilingual services, or even our Title I and our reading services, to provide, when we can, services within the classroom. So push in so that it's not all pull out. And some people are doing that very successfully. Some it's a big learning curve because things have been done a certain way for a long time. But that is the push, and Kristen and I are definitely on the same page with that across all of the literacy and the EL, and working. Marcy is totally on board with that for special education. So there are cases, there are circumstances, there are situations where a student may need pull-out services. We're not saying that's never the case, but to constantly, for any service, pull students out is not the best way to teach. So that's something we're working on.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Vitsky, questions?
I don't have any questions. I just have a couple of comments. First, thank you for how thoughtful you all were with your presentation and brief. It was really good and really interesting to hear. And I just want to say how much I appreciate hearing how much the coaches and interventionists have helped you a lot, because we sit here and we approve the budget and the administration recommends this, but we don't get to ever hear firsthand if it's working or see. And it's really awesome to hear that you all embrace that and just keep telling us what you need.
And for the record, we did rehearse to stay on time.
Mr. Hicks?
Yeah, I do have a few questions. Number one, I think, Mr. Christian, you alluded to this, and it makes me wonder, are we, over the course of the year, in addition to MCAS, giving the right number of assessments? Or are we under-assessing, or are we over-assessing? Because I do know, like, every time we go to do these, it takes time to do a full Dibbles for a grade, and that takes away from instructional time. So are we hitting the right amount at this point?
So in terms of Dibbles, we have to, by new state regulation in the universal screener, do an assessment like Dibbles 3 times a year. I think it's really helpful. As I mentioned, we use Dibbles also as a progress monitoring tool for those students who are falling behind in literacy, so we can really target and bring them up to the kind of scores that we saw tonight in terms of Dibbles. The MAP test was initially set to be given before the MCAS, but the principals called and they were all very upset. And they said, we do not want the MAP test before the MCAS because, of course, the MCAS is public. It's very public information, right? So it is tough at the end of the year, but that we're not going to see what the growth is at the end of the year if we don't do the MAP test at the end of the year. Other assessments that we give are really much more formative. One of my concerns, especially at the elementary level, was we didn't have anything that gave us more specific and timely assessment information in math. So this year we are using the EQUIP assessments in math, and it's again, it's a learning curve for teachers. It's something new, but it's something that they can look at with the coach immediately and look at what they need to do in their class. So we have more formative assessments that take place within the classroom, which I think are helpful, and we have the same kinds of things for literacy. But these tests, I don't think that we are over-assessing. It's Dibbles 3 times a year, it's MAP 3 times a year, and then it's MCAS. Those are the big ones. And honestly, it seems like a lot of time, but I think it's important, and the information we get, you could hear, is used. So, but good question, because we go back and forth about that too.
Thank you. Number 2, how many coaches do we now have that we've been able to add? So what's our total number of coaches currently across all the grades? And then second, to follow up with that, are we providing the coaches as a group enough or professional development to support them in the jobs that they're doing?
Okay. So we have humanities coordinator, which is Kristen. We have a STEM coordinator, which is Cara. And then we have a K-8 math director, which is Ben, who was brought on in the recovery positions last year. We do provide PD for them. Some of it we do in-house in terms of like the book study and conversation that way. We have always provided additional PD as needed for them. So we have those 3 curriculum directors, and then we have a literacy coach that's, again, focused on just the kindergarten, because that's really important time to start to catch everything. And then we have Nicole, who focuses on 1st and 2nd grade, and Jackie, who focuses on 3rd through 5th grade. And then we had 1 math coach before, so we added a literacy coach from what we had originally, like pre-COVID. And then we had a math coach pre-COVID, and we've added another math coach in addition to the K-8 math director, where we just had Cara, who was math K-12 before. So we have a lot of, I think, a lot of additional support.
Great. And then my last question is, all the data except for the ML data that Ms. Ando pulled out for us for a specific school is speaking about all students. Were there any noticeable, I guess this is more for the principals then, were there any noticeable patterns of concern or joy when we start to disaggregate the data into the different subgroups, high need students, students with disabilities, or multilingual learners that we should be aware of that we are also addressing?
So I believe Karen and Joe both mentioned the work that we're doing with BC and the Lynch Leadership Academy, that our goal is a group, and that the principals are involved with this and the entire curriculum team is involved with this, is looking at our subgroups. And they have all targeted subgroups to look at the data, look at the instruction. So each school might target a different subgroup. For example, Sargent might target a special ed subgroup, and Atkinson may target their Latinx population. But that is part of the work that we're doing in that group.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
The data is amazing, so thank you for all the hard work. This is really, really encouraging to see the investments that we're making into Haggerty and to the other curriculum materials, and the PD and the coaches are starting to pay off, and I'm really excited to see that. And I can also attest that Ms. Ando was a very good retail instructor. Having been my own.
I took a class too with her. I agree.
In my retail class.
with her mom.
With my mom.
Oh, you were in that group.
I was that group.
Right.
I heard about
Yes.
that group.
I heard about that group.
Very few people had to have their own mother in their retail class, but I was the lucky one who got to have, who was Janet Gaffney, who taught here forever. But Joe was in the class, and we saw each other on Friday afternoon, and I had to keep correcting my mother to sit down and stop passing up food and pay attention. So you all know where I get it from, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam
Good to
Chair.
see you again.
Ms. McDevitt?
Just a couple of thoughts.
excuse me, one, Lorene and Kristen, thank you very much, for being here and kind of working to pull all of the data together. And then the principals, I know it's hard after a long day and a gazillion things kind of going on in your buildings. This is exactly where you want to be on a Thursday night. I can pretty much make a bet on that one. So I want to thank you, for being here and presenting this information. I want to take just a quick minute and really acknowledge, the staff and the faculty that you have in your buildings that have, for the past 2.5 years or so, through the pandemic, kind of worked with our students, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the data that's here. But, this data may not be perfect, right? And we know that it's not. But I think we're having really honest conversations about what that is and what those numbers are, and we don't have an opportunity to make improvements on that if we're going to be dishonest about that and what our needs are. I'm really thrilled to see some of, I think Ms. Vitsky mentioned, the impact of the interventionist, the coaches, the PD that is helping with this and helping us have the right tools in your hands and the teachers' tools in order to dive into some of that data to specifically target some of those students who may need it. And I think, Mr. Hicks kind of mentioned, those subgroups of the students that need different type of coaching and assistance and moving all of that through there. Regardless of kind of how we take a look at these numbers, the kids sat in these desks, after being home, virtual, all of that. And they're really the story that's here, and where our numbers are is exactly as a result of where those kids are and how they kind of move through that. So, again, these numbers, if we did not have a pandemic, I'm sure would be quite different. But, the success of our students and our community to move forward together through all of this, I think speaks some pretty good volumes. I do want to take just a quick minute and talk about something, and I'm not trying to target a specific thing, but these numbers just really jumped out at me, and I'm not making a big statement here, but the underlying theme is we need to know what you need. We're going into budget season, and we're going to be getting MCAS results in. And I'm not saying this outweighs MCAS or MCAS outweighs it, although I think Mr. Cushing might disagree with that. But we need to know what you need. So when I look at the numbers and I see grade 1, right? All of those students came from the exact same kindergarten, right, at the ABECC. And I see 2 schools that are 68 and above, and 3 schools that are 44 and below. There's some pretty big gaps. So I don't know what that is. I don't understand that right now. We don't have the data. But what that tells me is we need to dive into that, and we need to figure out what that is. And I fully expect, as we come into budget season, that there is a recommendation. This is what we need. Right? And I don't think it's the same at every one of our schools, right? And maybe what it means is, and I don't want to get into any specific grade other than that, because that was so such a contrast to me. But maybe we need a part-time in some of our 3rd or 4th grade at a school to target that. And maybe there's another part-time that's somewhere else, right? But these kids are coming out of the pandemic. They have 1 shot at 1st grade. They have 1 shot at 2nd grade. And now all of these teachers are trying to figure out what did they learn, what didn't they learn, and how do we catch them up so that when we get to the melting pot of the middle school here, they're all kind of on a same level playing field. So my challenge to you guys and Lorene and Mrs. Ando and building principals is, take this data and tell us, come back and say, I need this. I can't say we're going to give it to you. I can't say, everything that you ask for is there. But we've got some data. We've got some really good data. And let us work with Jim and Town Manager Rodriguez and figure out what the best play is. And maybe it's on a 1-year play. Maybe it's a 2-year play. But we got to move this. And I really, again, I just challenge you to give us that data, give us that ask. Thank you.
Okay. So I just wanted to say thank you all for your time, and I know that, like Mr. McDevitt said, this is probably not where you want to spend your Thursday evening, so thank you so much. The data was thoughtful, and your reports were thoughtful and insightful, and super, super helpful. I loved hearing about your student or your school goals. With and so many of you are including peer observations, and I know as an educator, I would love that. I would love that time built into my schedule to go and observe someone else. It is the best way that you can get something quick. Oh, wow, that was really easy. I can go do that. I'm going to go take that and run with it now. It's so valuable. The collaboration is just consistent across. That's all you hear about is collaboration and teamwork and data and those data dives and a data room. And I wanted to mention actually that we need to add data room to the new school buildings that we need. But I mean, seriously, like these are spaces that are needed. Yes. And I don't know that that's been thought of or not, but it as it came up tonight, I wrote it down because we have a unique opportunity coming up. So let's get those data rooms in to the schools that we can. High quality tier instruction, just all the things that I loved hearing. It just makes me happy. I do have a couple of clarifying questions. When Mr. Cushing was talking about data and your multilingual learners and your tutors, do you not have a licensed ESL, ELD teacher at the school, or how are those students being serviced?
You want to go, or you want me to go?
You can.
Okay. We don't, not all of our teachers are, not all of our EL people are in a teaching position now. However, a number of years ago, the tutors were all asked by, I believe it was Hutch, right, to get their teaching certification. So some of our people are acting as tutors, but are actually teachers.
I see.
But I'm going to be honest here, Kristen, I've had this conversation. That was part of the reason I wanted to bring in this access data.
Yeah.
100% at the high school is phenomenal. And hopefully, I'm working on something for next week's meeting. Hopefully you'll get to meet that teacher, and the one who's done this in a different role as well. But the new teachers we have hired have really, really been phenomenal. And it's not to say anything negative about the people that have been here, but they were working under a different structure. And we have really been looking at, for example, Kristen shared with you, we've got all new materials, all new curriculum resources for all of those students at all the grade levels. So we're really spending a lot of time trying to update, change the way instruction is happening. And our goal as we move through the budgets over the next few years is to have EL teachers and to move out the tutor role. And that happened pre-COVID. That was part of our budget plan pre-COVID to continue to do that.
Great point, Lorraine. I think one of the significant parts of this is, we had a model with tutors that were certified teachers. And when we came up with a long-term staffing plan, we said we need to add more EL teachers, and we've increased that significantly and to where the need is. So the amount of people we service, it depends on the need, and so we've added them in the last couple budgets, and we'll continue to do it, and it's part of the longer term plan. But they're working hard at it, and we're seeing the results, particularly in EL.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. And then when you look at that chart that shows all the languages it is amazing and beautiful. And I hope that all the teachers in the district can see that. And then if you can break it up by school too, because I think a lot of times it's hard. You don't know. I mean, you can't tell how many languages a person speaks by looking at them, right? And of course, that's where I gravitate towards because that's my role. Let's see, what else? No, I think that was all I had. Are we good? Is everybody good? Okay. Thank you so much for all of your time. This was wonderful.
I just wanted to say one thing. Really appreciate the time. I had a rowing analogy too. I read somewhere about rowing, and I wrote this down earlier, so I don't know who brought the rowing up. It's not how hard you work, it's how hard you work together. And successful teams know that performance is a function of collaboration and coordination, not a sum of individual effort. And so you have principals here tonight, but there's a lot of people behind these scenes. We have folks working on SEL. We have folks working in nursing. We have folks working in food services. We have teaching assistants. We have staff. We have the leaders here coordinating these efforts. You have the folks here at central office. And so I think to Mr. McDevitt's point, in years past, new initiatives were, the budget was very small for. So to be strategic, to be thoughtful, to be planful, and to target where we need folks, and our ability to have honest conversations about it and support each other. You might be competitive at the microphone and bringing up different tests, but in a room, the change from, and I've been in the district 25 years, the change from when I was a principal to now is, as a principal, we used to think, oh, I've got to get what I need for my school. And in this group here, they really work together. And sometimes those needs change and ebb and flow over time. And they're tremendous at working together to take these greatly needed additional resources that have made a difference and saying, okay, let's make these adjustments. And I'm proud of them. And I'm proud of Lorene. I'm proud of the team here and the teachers and TAs and all the folks in the district. So we got a lot of work to do, and we will have an MCAS. We will come back and talk about MCAS at another time. But we're making progress and appreciate the time today.
I just wanted to mention one thing quickly. When Cara and Ben were not going to be here, I pulled some slides and tried to save a little time and do some of their talking points. We did have a slide that said what the Dibbles pieces were, the PSF, and what they actually stood for. So I apologize when I pulled those slides. That was no longer there, but we did have that. So I don't want that to be a reflection on the principals in any way either. So my bad. I think we can we let them go?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, thank you so much. But you don't want to hang out? You want to stay for public comment later?
And the scouts have made it out too. I think they made it longer than most.
Madam Chair, while we're in transition, it occurs to me that we didn't identify the people who are on this call remotely. So I just want to identify that I, Helen Picard, as a school committee member, am here remotely. Dr. Mealy is here remotely so that he can present. And there is a phone number, a 617 phone number. That is the North Andover CAM monitor person who is listening in on our meeting so that if we have any technical difficulties, they can be addressed and so that they'll be heard as if a remote person were participating. So just so you know, that was what that ding was, Mr. McDevitt, while you were speaking. It was the North Andover CAM monitoring phone number popping on and off a little bit.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. We're on to the chair's report. I'm going to try to be as quick as possible. Sorry, reading, and I think I might need reading glasses soon. So our first item is that we have our school committee member was Mr. McDevitt has been appointed to the Kittredge School Building Committee officially. That was done at the last select board meeting, so we are excited about that. And again, a Teacher Educator Hall of Fame, which is going to be, there's a document here with all the information. At the high school on Wednesday, October 26th at 6:30. That will also be our teachers who have reached professional status will be recognized that evening. And our Educator Hall of Fame was Peter Concannon. He was an adjustment counselor in the district for 25 years or more, I think, actually. And one of the highlights for him was that he started the Focus room at the high school, which is a room with adjustment counselors for students as needed for some social emotional support. Let's see, what else do we have? I didn't add this to a letter C, but I just we needed to double check. Mr. Hicks has a conflict for a November 17th meeting, so we wanted to throw that out there and see if we could change the date, if possible.
I would suggest that Michelle send out a Google, a doodle form or whatever it is. I mean, I know that
doodle
that's
poll.
a good idea.
It's whatever
Doodle
it
poll.
is.
Okay, that's a really good idea. And
I just don't have my work calendar.
yep, nope,
so.
that's perfect, and that it will be better use of our time.
And I apologize. I have to present at my other school committee that night.
Split yourself in half.
We'll be watching.
It'll be on Holliston Public Cam.
Okay,
And
so Sorry.
Just for clarity, Madam Chair, it's not required that all 5 of us be at all meetings, and it might be at some point that someone's not able to come or that we're not able to make an adjustment. I'm not suggesting we not make an effort, but we can have a meeting so long as we have the majority of members.
Yep, thank you. That's good clarification. Okay, let's move on to old business and look at the second reading of the superintendent school committee goals.
So I'll move that we approve the fiscal year 2023 superintendent school committee goals as presented in the packet.
Second.
Okay. Is there discussion?
Were there any changes made between the first reading and second reading?
Just a few minor adjustments.
Yeah.
Nothing substantial. I think that most importantly, for clarity, we had put that the school committee goal, just so folks in the public weren't confused,
Yep.
that's not for the superintendent evaluation, although, it's things that we will work on, but
Great.
together. But that's
Thank
the
you.
school committee goal.
Other questions or comments? Ms. Picard?
Yep, I have a couple of questions. One, I wonder if under goal 3, I think it is, with equity for all students, where we mention like student-led groups, et cetera, is that a place for BRC within our district still, or is BRC no longer operating within our district? I just wonder if that should be a bullet under one of those.
The BRC is still operating. I think that, it certainly could be there. I think we could add things to different components to this. It doesn't mean that BRC is excluded from this kind of work, and I think it's something we can keep an eye on. But I don't think we necessarily need it specifically in that goal.
Okay. It felt very central to the work we were doing for a long time, and so that's why I'm asking about it. Another thing that I noticed that we'd had for a number of years in the goals was hiring staff, specifically teaching staff, that reflects the student demographics, and that's no longer in our goals. I'm wondering if that might be something that would be added as a bullet point, or something you would want to consider.
That's a great point, Helen. And in the goals of the past, that was specific to our human resource development and human resource goal. It's certainly a goal within our strategic plan, and it's an effort that's ongoing. And again, we have several initiatives that we're working on that might not be encompassed in here, but it's certainly part of our strategic plan and something that we're working on and we've been making headway with. So.
Thank you.
Other thoughts?
I just had one thing that I thought we talked about. I don't remember if we specifically decided we were going to put it in as a goal or not, but it was really about an updated audit of our special education program. And it's not specifically here unless I'm missing it, or if we were just kind of putting it in and perhaps it needed to be accommodated for in the budget. But
it could be a possibility in the budget. I will say that is something that we've been discussing prior to even the goals. So it might not be specific in here, but it is something that we're in discussions with Marcy and our entire team to look at. As things change over time, one of the things is, although our out of district placements have been down slightly over the last couple of years, I think we have added. I think we're over 100 new additional students that receive special education services in Andover.
Yep.
And that changes over time too. So we have some needs, and Marcy has quite a bit of data on it, and we've been looking at someone from the outside, maybe not a comprehensive review like the former Walker report, but looking at structurally and organizationally and in terms of staffing what our needs are. So it's something that we're doing. And again, it's not specific in here, but it is something that's ongoing.
We were actually talking about it today. So, yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Going once, going twice. Okay. Are we ready for a vote? Ms. Picard?
Yes.
Ms. Vitsky?
Yes.
Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Moving on to new business, a first reading of the fiscal year 24 capital improvement plan.
That's me.
That's you.
So this is a meeting earlier than we usually do this. It's usually the first meeting in November that we approve. So I will not be looking for approval at the next meeting. I'll have more information for you. I wanted to just get this out, kind of talk through what you can expect to see in the next meeting, and then the following meeting after that. The top section of the summary sheet, I've added in the anticipated activity for that year. So you can see from the facilities master plan, those are things that aren't necessarily school department projects. They're part of the facilities master plan phase 2. You have the design of the middle school, which was approved at last year's town meeting. Construction funding would be anticipated to come to the May 23 town meeting for FY24. We have the feasibility part of the MSBA project for Kittredge. And then the following year would be design, and then the following year after that would be construction funding. I think originally we were hopeful that maybe construction funding might come in FY25, but just in having spent some time now with MSBA and getting a better sense of the timeline, this is more realistic. ABECC Gym, we would be going for design funding for this coming May. With construction request for the following year. Franklin Gym, just a gym, if you recall, that got pulled out of the Franklin project to be done sooner. That design would also be FY25 and construction in FY26. And then from the long-term plan that was presented, Atkinson, we would be looking for design in FY26 and construction in FY28. So that's consistent with the plan that you've seen in the past.
Why is there a year in between, but the others are back to back?
It's when the funding is anticipated to be available.
Oh, okay.
On that one.
Okay.
Yep. And then school maintenance and operations, those are our identified projects. We've had money for district-wide paving. We've done a pretty good job of catching up, other than the projects that we anticipate renovations to those schools. So the high school got done, Thompson got done, Sargent got done, and ABECC obviously was fairly new, so it didn't need to get redone. The other schools, we'll keep them, depending on the length. We probably would do Atkinson, given, Franklin, given how long out it looks like we would be doing that school. But the other ones will do what's necessary to keep them safe and in good shape. So you'll see those amounts have changed slightly. We've gotten the bulk of that work done. District-wide drainage issues, that one's gone up because for a while now it's been hanging out there to get a certificate of compliance with the high school. It never was officially done. There were 3 items that had to be done there. The sheds were within the setback, and those were moved. The athletic sheds, you see them now in like foul territory for the baseball field. That was done. There's a survey that still needs to be completed, and that's really the cost item here. And the other one is having an annual maintenance program, which we've started. So this will just take care of that and finally allow us to put that to rest. And then exterior maintenance renovation. That one is for the high school baseball field. I've been unrealistically optimistic each year that there could be funds left over at the end of the year to accomplish that, and it just hasn't happened. So I said I've got to put it in the capital and make it happen. It needs irrigation. It needs to be repaired. There's some parts that are uneven, and so talking to Rick Green, who's a great resource for us and really knows this stuff. That's the cost to do that. And adding in, because we've taken away district-wide security, we were fortunate this past year. we had, if you recall, phased in over a few years the security measures that we had identified through the assessment. But we were able to use technology money, the capital money we did get, and ARPA money that the town manager advocated for us and the select board approved. So we were able to do it all this year, and we can reallocate some of that funding. So I have in there, it's really time to take some, to do some improvements at the high school auditorium. It gets a lot of use. It's kind of behind in the time, so to speak, with regards to technology and putting on the performances our students want to put on. So it's time to take care of that. And the last item is just the IT infrastructure. We've been fortunate. That amount is 10% of the value of our infrastructure, and that's what they say you should set aside. And we've been able to also utilize those funds for IT needs, such as Chromebooks over the years, or other IT needs. In this case, we were able to use some for the security to take care of the cameras part of the package. So I'll have more detail. I'm still working with Brian on the estimates for the high school auditorium. Those numbers might change a little bit. I'm still getting some numbers on the expectation for the survey, for the high school, and for the baseball field. So I'll have more detail for you at the next meeting. I'm looking for approval at the first meeting in November. Any questions?
Are you shaking your head no, Ms. Picard? Okay. Ms. Vitsky, any questions?
No questions.
Mr. Hicks?
No questions.
Mr. McDevitt?
I can follow up with you later, but I mean, it is odd to see $300,000, I know it's over 5 years, with drainage issues kind of just continuing. And I mean,
I am glad I meant to say too, I'm glad you mentioned that. I think one of the things I'm going to have a conversation with Dr. Gilligan and the town manager about is kind of pooling some of those to be more flexible, because you're absolutely right. It is something I anticipated coming forward with a revision, because I don't anticipate it costing us that much over the next few years. But there are certainly, when you look at the track going to be need to be resurfaced, and a few years more out, it wasn't that long ago we did the field, but we need to start looking at how we fund that. And I think pooling, which we've done in the past, some of these things so that you can be more flexible about, but it's exterior, fields or whatever it might be. You're absolutely right, and that is coming.
Okay.
I like that you use pooling when you're talking about drainage.
That is a measure you can use.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so let's move on. Letter B, superintendent's contract. So we have completed negotiations for a successor contract. In executive session, we voted to approve. And so I think we need to vote to approve in public session. Does that sound correct? Or we need a motion?
We don't need to. However, I think we, in practice, have always approved contracts in public as well. So.
All right.
I move that we approve the superintendent's contract, successor contract.
I second.
Okay. We don't need discussion, do we?
I
Or is
don't-
there discussion?
I think we had discussion.
We had discussion. I'm
in
just checking.
executive, and I'd like to thank Ms. Vitsky and Mr. Hicks for working with Dr. Gilligan, and we're excited to continue on.
I echo all of that.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. Okay, so are we ready to vote? Okay, Ms. Picard?
Yes.
Ms. Vitsky?
Yes.
Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay.
Thank you, and we're looking forward to continuing this teamwork, particularly around operational capital and moving this community ahead. So thanks.
Thank you. Okay, is there a public comment?
Stan Lippert, 43 Stonecleve Road. Very impressive presentations this evening. Thanks for orchestrating all of that. That was a wonderful job. A lot of good facts, a lot of good information. Everything looked good to me. The one thing that really stood out to me tonight, and I'm echoing something that Dr. Gilligan said, this is a level of, I guess, energy and enthusiasm and teamwork I have not seen in the past. So it was very impressive. A great team we've got. Thank you all.
Thank you. There's no other public in the room. Is there a member comment, Ms. Vitsky? Ms. McCard, sorry.
Yeah, we just celebrated Indigenous Peoples Day / Columbus Day in North Andover. And some years ago, somebody said, just naming something, what difference is that going to be made? And I really am excited about the many things that North Andover has done in recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day as a new recognition. Our library's been doing a lot of things. Our Enrichment Council has done a lot of things. We had a land acknowledgement written by a middle school student that was shared on July 4th this summer. And all of us got a wonderful civics lesson shared with us from one of our middle school teachers, where the students discussed Indigenous Peoples Day and wrote their opinions on what should happen, and perhaps maybe there'll be a civics in action activity around that. So I just wanted to acknowledge once again the Indigenous Peoples Day being celebrated in North Andover, and the work that the public schools are doing to really bring Indigenous peoples' interest to light in the education process. So thank you.
Okay. Ms. Vitsky?
Yeah, I have a few. Just building on the energy that we saw tonight and in the district right now, there's a lot of good things happening. Dr. Gilligan alluded to the Nights on the Run. It was really, really successful. I think we raised 25% more this year than last year.
Wow. That's
we
great.
killed it. And we were kind of surprised, on the holiday weekend, were we going to get that many runners and sponsors? And we really did. The team did a really great job. And there's going to be some exciting additions to the high school as a result. So that was good. Cross country had its first meet on its new course yesterday, the home course, and it's beautiful. It's fabulous. Very hard. They have to run uphill for an entire mile. But it's going to be to our advantage facing other teams. So I know we're all invited to see it next week, and it's really special what the town's done with those funds. So that was nice. And then credit to Andrew, who mentioned the that college, the PICC college workshop thing, and take advantage of it. I did take advantage of it a couple weeks ago. It was phenomenal. I highly recommend anybody who has a kid going to college in the next 2 to 3 years to check it out, because there was so much good information. So thank you for recommending that, and credit to Deb Conti and her team for putting that on.
Thank you. Mr. Hicks?
So I was really excited to hear about the discussions our civics kids are having about Indigenous Peoples Day, which is being absolved of crimes, and Mr. McGravy being appointed to the Ted Kennedy Center Advisory Council. Really great work is happening in terms of civics action here in North Andover, and that makes me really excited for our kiddos. So kudos to all of them. Myself and Mr. McDevitt and Dr. Gilligan had the pleasure of going to senior night for the girls swim team last night. Congratulations to all of those athletes and to the coach. Wonderful program and fun to watch those kids compete and to celebrate the accomplishments of those seniors. And last spring we got a substantial donation from a company to revamp our locker rooms. I'd love to hear soon about and see what that construction has ended up looking like, and what those look like now. So, a plug, shameless plug.
Mr. McDevitt?
I think between Ms. Vitsky and Mr. Hicks, they stole all of my thunder. So I'm looking over my list and I've got nothing left. So over to you.
Yeah, and I can echo what everybody said as well. And I think that when I was listening to the principals talk about how it takes even the kindergartners to adjust until October, but last year March, and then our middle school principal said June. I too saw that at the high school where I teach, but this year feels better. Knock on wood, right? Like I keep like thinking like, oh, right. They know a little bit more. They know how to do this. They know how to be in a classroom. And so it just, between that and then the energy in here and listening to all the collaboration and all the wonderful things that are happening, and it's just, it feels good, and I'm just happy about that. There's probably something that I'm missing, but it's 9:15 at night and I'm tired. So, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I would move to adjourn to our next meeting.
Second.
Discussion, I can't speak. Okay, and we will vote. Ms. Picard?
Yes?
Ms. Vitsky?
Yes.
Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So I think that means we're adjourned.